Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the latest episode of What We Do in the Shadows, Pine Barrens. And I thought this episode was okay, mainly because I think each of the three kind of storylines that we get throughout here deserve their own episode to more fully explore, because while they didn't, really screw any storyline over, I think all of their potentials could have lent them to being a fully fleshed out episode. And kind of jamming them all together, mainly with Guillermo's and Nadja's kind of fighting each other and kind of feeding each other, it just felt like a really busy episode. But I still liked important bits that we got, mainly some lore and stuff with another kind of creature that we get that pops up, and then more kind of movement on kind of Guillermo's front. So we start off and we see that Nandor, Laszlo, Colin, and Sean are going on a guy's kind of retreat at Sean's cabin. And it's kind of funny seeing him in the car. We see that Nandor is really uncomfortable because he's the tallest one and he's behind Sean's seat. And it's like, all right. Trying to figure out what's going on. He's talking to Colin at one point to see what he's doing, and he's playing a Roblox game. And of course, kind of going into detail, kind of straddling the line between a kid that really gets engrossed into what they're talking about and Colin's kind of penchant for just overly explaining something to do his energy vampire kind of shtick. And we see that it's funny because they're going on a hunting trip, and Nandor says that vampires don't hunt, and Nandor says that vampires don't hunt, and Laszlo is just like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Of course we hunt. We hunt humans." He's like, "Oh, it's not the same." And it's like, okay. And of course they make up not make up, but try and hammer home to Sean that they have to be back home no later than 5 a.m. on Sunday because of the whole railroad shtick as their job and all that. Then we flip off after we get through the intro and everything, because I did like how Colin is just explaining everything and then it rolls into the intro to pretty much cut him off because it's like, yeah, it's not really that important, and we kind of get where it's kind of going for. We see Nadja and the doll pretty much having a bloodbath, and Nadja thinks that she's got the house to herself. Now, this part is where it kind of gets a little bit nutty, where you're shifting back and forth between Guillermo and Nadja pretty much thinking each other are at the house alone, which is kind of weird. I just needed a little bit more explanation why each of them thinks that they're alone in the house. Granted, they live together, so they should know when, if they know that the guys are going off for their own guys thing, wouldn't you check to make sure that, hey, is she doing something? Or, hey, is he doing something? You know what I mean? So, not that I don't think that the premise of them bumping into each other can't work, it's just I'm usually expect better from What We Do in the Shadows to have that kind of hammered home to work more seamlessly and organically. And we see that Nadja decides to pretty much have a girls' night, and Guillermo decides to have his family over. And each of them are kind of remarking upon how Nadja needed a break, and Guillermo, he's never really left alone. Yeah. Then we see Nandor and Laszlo, because she was talking about how Nandor and Laszlo needed to little chance to reconnect because they haven't been getting together for 80 years, which is really very strange because this is the fourth season of the show, and granted they have weird kind of tiffs that they would sometimes get into, but nothing of the odd couple level that's been elevated in this episode. I needed more explanation to why they went to pretty much getting to real the actors definitely sell that they are pissed at each other for one reason or another, but I needed it felt like a real ramp up that needed more of an explanation than just they don't spend time with each other. It's all right, we haven't really seen you guys spend time with each other. It's really kind of weird. I'm like, all right. Oh, and by the way, I do like that we get an interesting kind of pairing later on, which I'm just glad that they kind of just, hey, we don't really see these kind of characters interact. That's kind of cool. And then we see that Sean is pretty much talking about killing a deer, and then we see more of them, more of like Nandor and Laszlo kind of getting into it. But it mainly just seems to be a bottle kind of thing for this episode of like, okay, the central conceit is they have shit with each other. And then we see that Sean's like, hey, yeah, it was my grandfather's cabin. He got it off this like Polish guy. And then we just see that Laszlo and Nandor go into like a dick off pretty much, where Laszlo's pretty much coming off as a know-it-all, as Nandor's like, he's a know-it-all, whereas Laszlo's like, well, even though Nandor's doing the same kind of thing to him, trying to infer the stuff when Sean would pretty much fucking tell them if they would let him fucking finish a sentence, how Laszlo thinks that Nandor is just a dude that's got a pea brain in a mammoth body. It's like, god damn, that's a way to call somebody an idiot. And the thing is, a really funny bit that we get is that, like, Laszlo sounds so confident in what he's telling him and everything like that about, like, really, like, awesome kind of Polish bowlers, and gets Colin to pretty much use the iPad to find info on that, which is interesting to see them kind of doing their kind of parrying and utilizing this, which actually works in both of their favors. One, to help either Laszlo get information to fuck with Nandor, and Colin in pretty much trying to like bore and or energy suck with doing this kind of explanation. It's kind of ingenious when you think about how their relationship kind of works like that. But Nandor gets pissed off and throws his iPad, and we then see that Sean goes to sleep, and Nandor and Laszlo decide to kind of go out and hunt. And by the way, I always have to kind of hit, I love the costuming because I really liked Laszlo's red jacket that he had on. I'm like, alright, cool. So they pretty much go out, and Nandor says that he's like working on an echolocation thing to hunt for humans. But then Colin, of course, being Colin, decides to like talk about stuff with his Roblox. But that's fucking with the echolocation. And he's like, I need silence. And then Colin's like, yeah, my iPad's at 8%. Can we kind of like go back? So we get that pairing where we see Colin and Sean kind of talking and out hunting in the daylight. And I just kind of wanted to understand what was like the explanation that Nandor and Laszlo would give Sean that, hey, we're not out in the daylight. But it's really kind of cool to see Sean and Colin interact like this, because you don't really see that often. Sean is mainly utilized in a very kind of like ensemble kind of scenarios most of the time, or is very much paired up with Laszlo because he has the most connection character-wise with him. So it's really kind of cool to see him like, hey, what's going on? How are you doing, dude? And we see that Colin is not sure that Laszlo likes him, and Sean says that, like, no, the dude loves you, man. And he's like, he doesn't want me to grow up to be an energy-sucking bore, and asks Sean if he thinks he's bored. He's like, well, you got your computers and stuff. What else do you like to do? And then he goes into how he likes to go down in the basement and smack holes in the walls. And Sean's like, it's just you doing that to holes in the walls and not people, right? And you see that there's some weird fucking thing going on with Colin on this. Now, granted, I don't know if this just is the joke. It's like, hey, it's a kid going down in the basement and fucking smacking holes in the walls. Or if there is something deeper to that. We'll have to see as the show goes on. I'm leaning more towards that it's just a joke. It's like, hey, he's a fucking weird-ass kid that's just going down and knocking holes in the walls. Though, granted, I would like if it's something, like, deeper or deals with some kind of, like, emotional thing with Colin, or he's actively trying to find something that he like hid in the wall as Colin Robinson that is like awesome, or like money or something like that, or it's an unconscious thing that like he keeps getting put to sleep with like the home renovation thing, and it's just subconsciously fucked with his mind so much that he just smashes holes in the walls because he's just seen so much home improvement stuff. There's a lot of different kind of avenues that they could go with this, so I hope we see something on that. He says mainly that it makes him feel good. It's like, okay, we'll have to see why that makes him feel good. So we shift over, and we see that Nadja and the girls, they're doing their thing. Marwa is involved with this as well. Now, I do like that they are not just like having Marwa kind of just disappear into the background. I do like that they're dragging, not dragging, but bringing her into kind of stuff. Now, granted, she's not fully utilized here, just doing some comments here and there, but it gives me hope for what they would be able to potentially do with her going forward. So they just have like a female fuckabout as Nadja brings it on, and they just pretty much watch Mamma Mia, and then Nadja gets kind of like brought into Guillermo's thing. Guillermo gets everything ready. He hasn't seen his family pretty much in like 12 years, so he's pretty much trying to like make up for time and everything. So he brings him in and explains that it's a video montage for like one of their birthdays, and we really start seeing that Guillermo's kind of lies start falling apart because they ask him about like him working at a railroad, but not working at the Panera Bread that he used to, but he's like, he was promoted to the one that was at Penn Station. It's like, they don't have one at Penn Station. It's a pop-up kind of thing. It's like, alright. But we learned that, like, Nadja's favorite film is Mamma Mia, but the reason that Laszlo doesn't want to watch it is reminds him of all the bastard children he sired as a human. It's like, okay. Like, I can kind of get that, and that's an emotional thing to kind of, like, fuck about with, but it, like, reminds her of her home. And it was kind of nice to see her kind of go through it and, like, yeah, alright, that makes sense. Let's see here. So, Sean's pretty much telling a scary story about the Jersey Devil. Colin's like, I don't believe that shit. He's like, yeah, well, the Jersey Devil comes around and, like, gets kids that don't believe in him and all that kind of shit. And pretty much goes into a detailed explanation of what the Jersey Devil looks like. And Laszlo's saying that that's fantastic and all that shit. And we also learn from Nandor and Laszlo that the Jersey Devil isn't real. It was a myth that vampires made up to pretty much explain dead bodies in the woods. However, that is not exactly entirely the case, as we learn throughout this episode. And also, we see that Sean's like stomping around and accidentally knocks the fucking shotgun over and shoots something. Everyone's like, Jesus Christ. So, honestly, guns should not be around this man. And granted, it shouldn't be around these people either, because we get into that later. Let's see. And we see that, like, Nandor has a problem with Laszlo calling Sean his best friend. And he's like, yeah, Sean's my best friend, but he never realizes when he's been fucking had. And we see that Nandor tries to join in and do a cheers kind of thing, because we get a little example of that kind of, like, disconnect between Nandor as Laszlo and Sean have their own kind of thing going on. We see Sean talking about special guy time, going to sleep, and they like put him to bed, and Laszlo, being kind of cool at least, asks Colin what he's kind of doing, and he's kind of showing his like, yeah, that might be cool, but what about this, as he's fucking around with a gun, and Nandor's like, listen, from a soldier, don't do that, that's a weapon, not a toy. And then he just like, I call your soldiering into question pretty much, because the last time you were soldiering it was like swords and clubs, and I'm like, no, that's not a toy, that's a weapon. Nandor's right on this, man. And that, of course, starts escalating this shit into what we see become their kind of bigger kind of fight. We go back to the girls pretty much watching the movie. Nadja needs some more blood and decides to go down and get it. And she's like singing Mamma Mia stuff, as we then see that Guillermo is with his family. She passes over, is like, what the fuck is going on here? And then Guillermo tries to handle the situation, saying that Nadja is his maid / girlfriend. And and we then get a little cutaway as he's talking about how all the lies keep compounding and like fighting with each other because of all of them piling up. And it's like, yeah, it really shows what happens. Now, granted, I would have liked this better if we had had a full episode devoted to this, where we just see the lies spinning out of control or whatnot, because it seems a little bit more fast-paced and escalated than I would like, but it's not as badly done as it could have been. Let's see here. Nadja decides to kind of play along, and the thing is, we learned from Guillermo that he pretty much said that Nadja was his girlfriend to pretty much get his family off his back of trying to set him up with this, like, someone in one of their churches. Calling Guillermo a shitbag as his pet name. And then, of course, the family's like, why didn't you bring her down if she's here? It's like, yeah, you have to explain that shit. And then, of course, the grandma decides to go and talk with Guillermo, pretty much laying out that she's like, listen, my mom told me that our family fights evil things, and that we have this thing going on where we feel fire in our hearts and we get the goosebumps and all that. And Guillermo's like, yeah, it makes sense that since I've got the vampire killing stuff in me, it would be in my family as well. Granted, it does open up some questions of why this kind of reaction has not happened to Guillermo up until now. It might be his complete and utter favorite desire to become a vampire that kind of fucked with it a little bit, to where he didn't get to, like, I'm going to immediately kill a vampire off the bat, because that's what his family pretty much gets into later on. So that just needed a little bit more of an explanation, and they could have done that. We get back to Nandor and Co., and they're pretty much like start their fighting and all that kind of stuff. Laszlo pretty much looking at a nudie mag. Nandor, of course, asks him what he meant about the pistol. He's like, you haven't seen action in a millennia. You're a former soldier. And he's like, no, I will always be Nandor the Relentless. And then pretty much hits him for getting kicked out of Eton. And he's like, I told you that in confidence. He's like, oh, now you're putting down your nudie mag. When it comes to you, now you gotta, like, do this shit. And you're not number one. And says the guy who left the house. And I'm like, god damn, that was an important bit for Nandor to pretty much, like, explore certain shit. And Nandor rightfully explains that. And then he's like, nope, just like when we got into the house. And he pulls out this whole agreement that, like, Nandor should have got first pick of rooms. However, Laszlo then has to pull out this amendment thing that says that, like, if not all vampires are present, a quorum of, like, 2/3 can do the kind of shit. And he's like, you always have to be right. And, like, the house went to shit under your watch, man. He's like, watch your language in front of the kid. And he's like, oh, yeah, you just lay about, you play piano, you have sex with Nadja. He's like, those are that sounds like life goals to me, man. And let's see here. And then, of course, brings up the whole seating arrangement, where Laszlo had a very good explanation for why he decided to go on the other side of Sean so that way he could talk more fluidly with his friend. It's like, yeah, I kind of get that. And then after that's where they did the whole pick and everything. And then, of course, Laszlo pretty much calls him a jabroni and accidentally fires off the gun. And he's like, you shot at me, as Nandor is able to catch the bullet. And then he starts kind of shooting at Nandor as Nandor keeps calling him a jabroni. And then accidentally in the last shot hits him in the hand. And he's like, oh shit, I'm sorry about that. I was just meant to kind of shoot at you. But then Sean's like, what the fuck's going on here? Who's shooting? And he's like, nothing. But he's like, well, where's the kid? What do you mean? The door's open. He's like, shit, they gotta go find Colin now. Let's see here. Then we get back to Nadja and Guillermo's family, and she's actually being good. But the thing is, the family goes into vamp killing mode. And she's like talking to them, and then we see the escalation of the family as the one dude's talking about, like, she actually likes Guillermo's family better than him. Like, oh, these people are all kind of cool. I'm like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, I like hanging out with them. But then she's asking if anybody else in the, like, she actually asks pertinent questions and wants the answers to them. It's like, damn. Like, asking if anybody else has kind of, like, crappy eyes like Guillermo. Is like, oh, this one dude, Miguel, got LASIK. But then she's pronouncing it wrong, and the dude starts escalating. Like, why the fuck do I feel like I'm on fire? And then the grandma fucking, like, pulls off one of the arms and is ready to, like, go after Nadja. And they keep chasing her, and Guillermo's like, shit. She's like, what the fuck? She's dodging all the stakes and everything. She's like, why is there so much sharp wood in this house? And they have really good effects in this episode. Mainly also because of the ending with Nandor and Laszlo, but also Nadja and pretty much dodging what's going on. She's like crawling on the walls and everything. Guillermo's trying his best to like hold off his family from freaking annihilating her. And she's like, this is my house. And she's floating, do you have any idea who you were fucking with? And then they just start tossing shit and she's like, shit. Let's see. We also check in on the girls as they are just watching the movie. Guillermo does get in front of him, says that he knows she's a vamp. She lives in this house. I live in with these other vampires. I desperately want to be a vampire myself. I don't work at the railroad. I work for them. And Nadja's not my girlfriend because I'm gay. And it's like, wow, that was really kind of cool to have Guillermo have that like full moment of being completely and utterly honest with people, because he tries to be honest with the vampires, but that doesn't work that well. But him being able to come out and do all that kind of stuff, and his family was okay with it. He's like, why do you want to be a... They were more like, why do you want to be a vampire? And it's like, oh no, we've known you've been gay forever, pretty much. You're good. And they hug it out. And it's funny because they're like, why do you want to be a vampire? Not just like, hey, being a vampire is fucking cool, okay? And then she kind of like rolls out a little bit. But it was kind of nice to see that kind of be confirmed, and to have that kind of brought into the fore, and to see how happy Guillermo was to like acknowledge that part of himself. But then he's like, ah shit, now I'm just gonna like kill you guys. We have to kind of like deal with that. Alright. We get back to Nandor and Laszlo as they're pretty much searching for Colin, and we get that Nandor's Laszlo does apologize. Didn't mean to hurt him. He was just shooting at him. And then we see Nandor's hole in his hand. It's like, Jesus Christ. And the thing is, Nandor's been a pill the whole trip. He's like, I wasn't for no reason. I was upset because they haven't hung out so much. I'm like, yeah, but that's why you talk to people. You don't become a giant fucking insufferable asshole. I mean, granted, if you get to that point, you need a little bit more ramp up than just boom. Oh, and we also had, like, Laszlo, when the whole bags were going on, he had this, like, magic flute that he was, like, bringing woodland creatures and skunks and shit. That becomes important as we get through this. And he brings up, like, we used to hang out, but now you're having beers with Sean or rehearsing songs with Colin, and they never hang. And Laszlo's not comfortable with, like, talking about his emotions, but he's like, yeah, my feelings are not dissimilar. And of course, then they hear the iPad. It's like, why the fuck did you run off? And he's like, I heard something outside. You two were too busy arguing about jabronis. And then they hear a roar and Sean scream, and they get back to the cabin, and we see that the Jersey Devil does fucking exist, and it looks exactly how Sean fucking, described it. It's like, holy shit. And it's like, look at the size of its balls and shit. And then Laszlo's like, alright, where's my magic flute? And Nandor's like, I put it in the van because it was annoying me. So then we see him shift over there, pretty much get it. He's trying to use it, and it's kind of working at first, but then the devil's like, ah, fuck. And one of the great ones was like, Sean's like, I'm going to get the shotgun. And Laszlo's like, I've been double-crossed by the devil. And the way his pronunciation is fucking on point. It's just like the way he does and delivers his lines. Just, god damn it, I love it. And he's pretty much got him by the throat. Nandor tries to help, but they pretty much get into a situation where they're pretty much grabbed and are at the mercy of the Jersey Devil. And then Colin's like, wait a minute, let me play some New Jersey music. And then Living on a Prayer starts getting pumped out, and we see that the Jersey Devil is like headbanging to it as he's like banging the shit out of him, and then tosses Laszlo pretty much into this lake. And Nandor is pretty much like on the ground at one point. But then Colin's like, fuck this, let's get to the good part, because it had started singing along, and then it starts doing the chorus and everything. Laszlo bats and humans back in and starts sucking and draining the Jersey Devil, as Nandor helps as well, and then they kill the Jersey Devil that way. As Sean then comes back outside, he's like, I got my rifle! And then immediately shoots himself in the foot. And he goes, ah! And goes down. It's like, I love Sean's character. Like, he adds just great shit to this. Oh my god. He's like, fucking Jersey! As Colin's like, can we go home now? It just all of that piled together worked very well. I'm like, yes, okay, alright. And I think that this storyline would have worked better, and especially the reveal of the, I do like the reveal of the Jersey Devil. A lot of this would have worked better if it had been been its own episode. It does get the bulk of the time, so it does get the best kind of development out of all the three storylines, but if it had just been focused on it, I think we would have had a better kind of ramp up of Nandor and Laszlo's whole kind of butting head situation. But I do like that there's even things that the vampires get wrong, and that's like, oh no, that's just a myth that we fucking tell people, so that way they just don't give a shit about the bodies in the woods. It's like, ah shit, that thing fucking actually exists. It's funny that there's a thing for mythological creatures. I'm like, that mythological creature doesn't exist, and they're like, what the fuck, it does. Well, we get back and we see that Nadja's pretty much hypnotized the family and getting ready to kill them. However, Guillermo's like, hey, please don't kill them. Just hypnotize them, remove all this stuff, and we'll be good. And the thing is, she doesn't want to see, like, she understands seeing her family die because she had seen her uncle and his donkey, which he was married to. The donkey fell on and crushed the uncle, and then the donkey died of alcoholism, and that had been her family, and she hadn't had it in hundreds of years. And she then was also like, if I killed this whole family, would he call me fucking mommy? It's like, shit. So she's like, listen, alright, here's the deal. I'll hypnotize him, take away everything except you coming out as gay. But one night a month, you get Nandor, Laszlo, and Colin out of this house, so that way I got that night to myself, and you get me Mamma Mia too. And I'm thinking, wow, that's like perfect. Like, if that gets you your objectives and Guillermo doesn't have to like kill anybody or hurt anybody, yeah, that's a fucking win-win. That's like fucking reasonable. It's weird when I'm watching this, I'm like, alright, what unreasonable shit will you ask? I'm like, god damn, that's actually a very reasonable request. Thank you for not killing these people. And then she's like, oh yeah, the family knows everything except about the house, about the railroad and everything, and about the vampire and everything. And we get the whole gay bit, and she's like, oh, everybody's gay. And Guillermo's like, no, they're not. It's like, oh, alright. And his line of shade worked. I was like, okay. And then we see that Nandor's pretty much telling, yeah, we vanquished the Jersey Devil, and then we drove home, and then Laszlo's like, no, I drove home. And then we shift over, we see how Laszlo's driving, where he's fucking using his powers to kind of do it. It's fucking crazy. It's interesting to see what level vampires will do to certain things for how to drive. And he says, we hypnotized Sean, but I don't know, we might have fucked him, as Sean is getting into Roblox with Colin. And it's like, yeah, you've done a fuck ton to this dude. So, yeah. Let's see here. And of course, they brought home a souvenir in the form of the Jersey Devil head as they hang it up. And then Laszlo's last kind of thing is like, what the fuck is that? Because Guillermo had put like a poster over the portrait thing that was going on. And that's where the episode ends. So, it will be interesting to see kind of what other kind of stories we'll get into. I was happy with the most of the kind of jokes and everything running in here. I just thought that most of these stories had enough potential to have episodes in and of themselves and to be better fleshed out and everything. Not that they were complete and utter crap in how they were executed here. I just think that they deserved better. Like, you could have gone fucking buck wild with, like, doing one with the guys' night out and one with the girls' night out and really fleshing out not just stuff. Even though I do vehemently agree that, like, Guillermo's family situation and all that shit that we got with him explaining he was desperate to become a vampire and that he's gay is important and deserves its own episode. I don't want that completely cut out and thrown away. You know what I mean? That was a big, pivotal kind of character moment. And I also love that we got more kind of, like, lore and shit with, like, the Jersey Devil. That's always good, and always bringing in other supernatural creatures to kind of just flesh out the world and what the fuck's going on, especially when it's like, hey, we're guys, we're in a cabin, we're hunting and shit, and it's like, shit, the Jersey Devil actually fucking exists. Alright, how do you deal with this motherfucker who's flying with giant balls and a button cock? As Sean described it. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.